is this thing on? What is happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Wednesday. What's happening out there in the wild world of October? Just coming into October. Hope everybody's enjoying this cooler, a little bit crisper air. Got thoughts of boost weather coming into my mind, although I am still stuck in tire limbo. That's right. Nothing could be more fun than lower temperatures, boost weather firing up. I mean, just flat out Chamber of Commerce Day pretty weather, only to have the national back order still grinding along with those Mickey Thompson ET Street R's. Mike Crowley, I'm saying good evening. Eric saying, what's up, Professor B? What's up, Eric? TU is in. We are live. All right, I love it. So yeah, I am stuck in tire limbo, and that has kind of turned into something a little bit interesting. So I just want to share a story real quick before I get into the typical monologue. Foxy is probably the biggest grin-inducing apparatus I think I've ever been around. Don't get me wrong, Revline's a badass car, and with the new rims, the new attitude, everything, in the process of making a couple little minor changes to the tune on that thing, on Revlon, basically fan settings, stuff like that. By the way, hysteresis doesn't do nothing. Had to reset a bunch of settings that I had put together. Some cars are just a little bit different, and I've got to actually finish up basically finish validating the street setup for Foxy, mainly because things are a little bit different on the street than they are on the dyno, and I'm trying to get a few things sorted out. Anyway, that doesn't matter. In the process of doing that, we took Foxy out, and between my wife laughing hysterically as I'm pitching this thing and coming out of roundabouts completely sideways, doing donuts, basically 270 and park it type stuff, seeing if I can actually execute a perfect 270 score, by the way. Anyway, she still got it. This car is a freaking riot. One of the most fun things about the car now is the partial throttle rolling burnout in second gear. Get the car rolling, just putting along second gear, roll into the gas, just kind of yip on the gas, and the tires will immediately start to light up, and then just shower down on it, and then watt into third gear. This thing is an absolute riot now. Real sharp throttle response. Had a lot of you guys asking if I was going to do anything about the intake manifold, and honestly, I'm not really sure that I'm there yet. The GT40 is antiquated and, quite frankly, as bad as it is, because they're not very good intake manifolds, is really good at doing one thing, and that's making a lot of torque and a lot of throttle response, which makes this engine feel like it's a 400 cubic inch engine when it's 351 cubic inches, give or take. It's actually a 10 over, by the way, and it doesn't matter. So that's just been what we've been up to. Absolutely acting like a couple of dumb kids in an old Fox body Mustang. And like I say, we burned through probably half a tank of gas last weekend, just out playing around with it, checking out AFR. Didn't even bother to make any changes to the tune. I've got to make some changes to wide open throttle. I need to lean it up just a little bit, but aside from that, it's dead on. 12.2, 12.3 under heavy load partial throttle, which is what I was mainly tuning for. That's about where the air fuel is. Gets a little bit rich at watts, so I got to pull a little bit of fuel out of it, but certainly wasn't hampering the performance of this thing, that's for sure. So anyway, so the topic, this is something that, we talk about a lot, us old guys, right? And it's a funny topic, really, because it's this ongoing debate with some folks as far as when did fast cars stop being considered fast. And what I mean is, your Mustangs, your Vettes, Camaros, Challengers, Chargers, Hellcats for that matter. You look on the internet and these cars are making just some obnoxious power numbers. We're talking 1,100 horsepower. To the rear wheels in some cases, which, back in my day, get him? Damn it, flew off. Anyway, oh yeah, over under for body count tonight on Skeeters. I think I'm going to go with about 4. So place your bets. Anyway, Getting back to it, you know, coming up with the Vipers and the Supers and the Vets and some of the real heavily modified LT and early LS platforms with blowers and a lot of nitrous. You know, it's funny, back then 1,000 horsepower to the rear wheels was the goal. I mean, if you could get close to that, things were getting really interesting. In fact, 750 horsepower to the rear wheels was kind of your garden variety, really fast Supra. I mean, it basically was 2JZ cams, the hybrid 75 millimeter single, and you were pretty much there. I mean, that was basically how it worked. You know, for the Vipers, it was heads, cam, intake, throttle bodies. Obviously, the spring package, long tubes, etc., would get you to about 600-ish to the rear wheels. And then you touch that up with, you know, a 200 or a 250 shot. You're looking at around 850, maybe 900 horsepower to the rear wheels. I know all there is to know about that stuff. And of course, the Vets were also fast. I mean, you kind of get the idea. It was always, and the funny thing is where the Vet had a weakness, the Supra had an advantage. Where the Supra had an advantage, maybe the Vet would have an advantage somewhere over the Supra. And it was like this nice rock, paper, scissors game that was always getting played back in the day, especially with the roll racing stuff that we like to do. And so, anyway, getting back to it, you know, but when did fast really quit becoming fast? And so some friends of mine and I were talking about this, and this was my argument. I said, look, when fast quit being fast, it happened in 1998. And it was like, well, why 1998? Why so specific? And this was my argument. Well, you had the LS just coming onto the scene right around 1998. Aftermarket manufacturers went nuts over that car. But you got to go back just a little bit because you've got to give, you know, the aftermarket a minute to get rolling. But in 1996, Ford released the 4-valve Cobra, and it was within about a year or so of that, so say 97 or 98, when you had your first centrifugal supercharger kits for those cars. And I remember it very clearly. This little 4.6 liter, it was a color, like a maroon color Cobra. And keep in mind, this was high dollar stuff back, you know, 20, 30 years ago. And here's the interesting thing. That car was one of the first cars that I ever saw lay down 600 horsepower to the rear wheels. I mean, it was a, oh shit. All right, that one, I gotta clean the wall up after that one. Dude, Nosferatu. Anyway, body count 1 and counting. So anyway, that was the first car I ever saw lay down 600 horsepower to the rear wheels, and that was an unheard of number. But as you fast forwarded from that, oh, by the way, that car blew up, I think it was like 2 weeks later. So anyway, mainly because tuning wasn't quite where it needed to be. That same combination would probably live indefinitely today. But interesting enough, you go 1998, 1999, and then 2000. You get into the 2000s, and some interesting things really started to develop. Aftermarket had already pretty well sorted themselves out. They were well on their way to embracing the LS platform. And the reason why the LS platform was such a big deal, and how the LS made the big block obsolete, was that the LS came with a set of heads that basically flowed like a stock set of big block heads. I mean, it might not be an exact number. And we're not talking about like Boss Mustang numbers here, like the old Boss Cleveland heads, but it was close. And these were not special engines. These were SUV engines. These were van engines, pickup truck engines. Basically, every pushrod owners, or pushrod, well, everybody was a pushrod owner back then. I mean, overhead cams and stuff like that were out there, but, you know, just not with the Camaros, and, well, still never were, but you get the idea where I'm going with this. It was everybody that had grown up in the hot rod era, the golden era of muscle cars, were taking a look at these all aluminum LSX, because, you know, you didn't know what to call them. LS1, LS6, LS2, LS9, what are these things? Anyway, while everybody was still trying to play catch up and get all their nomenclatures figured out, what GM had done is they had put together a combination that literally was the next evolution of an internal combustion engine. And like I said, it in the process made the old generation small block and old generation big block all obsolete in one in one clean pass. And you can say, well, you can put heads on a Gen 1 or whatever you want to call it, small block, the original small blocks. You can put heads on that, intake, carburetor, and make tons of power. And that's absolutely true. But, and it's a big but, you can go to basically any dealership back then and buy a Tahoe and have an engine that was making significantly more power than any of the engines from the golden era of muscle cars, at least in terms of small blocks, and would do so more reliably for a lot longer and, quite frankly, a lot less expensive. The only downside to it is that there just wasn't any real prestige behind it, at least until the 5th gen Camaro showed up on the scene. So it was interesting as you kind of started to blend, and that was until 2010, but you start to see where this is going. As the LS was basically making a name for itself with the Vets, and as the 4-valve engines were starting to make a name for themselves with the Mustangs, you would see this major split down the line between guys that were wholeheartedly, old school small block, and the new school guys are going, why would you even waste your time? And although there are some arguments that we can get into about, okay, well, if the car came with the original small block, it's just simply easier to hot rod the small block and get the power numbers out of it and go on about your business. Although that may be true, the reality is that was still an old way of thinking. And basically you were just repairing, even if you're hot rodding it, in this case, you're just repairing and trying to make more durable, or at least, for a better way of putting it, a more functional for your needs engine in that old generation small block, where the LS just marched way out and left everybody standing. So there was that. Now the other side of that argument was, well, everything was all fine and good. The aftermarket really hadn't gotten into their stride until 2004, 2005, 2006. And that's really when you started to see the big spread. Okay, you can talk about the Genesis, and that's really more where my point was coming. It was like, look, guys, you have to understand that not only did the LS completely and totally change the game, the 4-valve Romeo-based engines, like what was in the Navigator and in the Cobra, started to set the stage for the Coyotes to come. But once you started getting into your basically 1999, that's really where things started to separate much more quickly. The pace of the game got a lot more brisk. Manufacturers started coming out with, obviously you guys know me, one of my all-time favorites, the Lightning. Absolutely loved that truck. And when that truck first hit the scene, it caught a lot of attention, not just because it was fast, but it was big block powerful. And so to the guys that would look at this and go, it's just a modular, brand new, old school was still real hard on the new guys back then too, until the new guys started taking their lunch money. But the fact of the matter is that Lightning was, 385 and 450 foot-pounds of torque when it was first released, and it went up to like 400 and something horsepower. God, it's been forever since I even thought about them, and 450 foot-pounds. Whatever the numbers were, they were stratospheric numbers for the time, but they were very familiar to old school hot rodders. These were the numbers that they would wish that they had out of their legendary engines. LS6 454 comes to mind. The L72 big blocks, all the basic entry level, what you would think to be powerful engines, 390, 415 horse. These engines couldn't even compare to these modern supercharged small blocks, if you want to look at them like that. But they were engineered to literally be a complete clean slate. So because of that, a lot of folks started buying these things up. And, at this stage of the game, the Viper had already started to evolve. The Vet was already coming into, 2003, 2004, coming out of the 5th gen and starting to fade into the 6th gen. Your LS6s were out, basically smoking, folks. and doing so over and over and over again with a repeatability and with a durability that you just didn't see back in the day. And you can keep making this argument like, well, what about, okay, so now we're talking about 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. Now we start talking about the GT500. So we've had the Lightning, the Terminator Cobra showed up on the scene and blew everybody's mind. But now the GT500 lands, and we're starting to talk 500 horsepower, 500 pound-feet of torque, and that was just the beginning. Those types of numbers were never seen in the golden era of muscle cars. Not only that, this was a net number. This was not a gross number. Look, guys, keep in mind, those engines back in the day were gross horsepower rated, and to be very frank, those numbers for a lot of the engines were a little bit fudged, but not by much. Not by the amount that you would be led to believe. Let's just put it to you that way. A lot of them, by the way, were way overrated. In fact, one of the most overrated engines was the 440 Mopar. 375, that's with the entire front engine accessory drive removed, no fan, headers, ice cold water going through it, and I don't know, probably the prettiest day with the highest barometric pressure. I mean, that thing would regularly underperform. But, you know, that being said, that's not a knock on the engine. That's just the way that it was back then. So, to that point, you start getting into these later eras and the numbers just keep on going up. Through the entire Ford era with the Super Snakes and everything else. Notice I'm not talking about Dodge in this, at least not the way that you would think. I mean, yeah, in 2008, you had the 6.1, which brought back the, I don't know, psychologically satisfying 425 horse number. And then from there, the 6.4 showed up with 475 and then 485 horsepower. And then, of course, the Hellcats make it to the party and then shuts everybody's mouth at 707. And really, that's the interesting number right there, is that 2015, the Hellcat. Because this is the other side of that argument. When the 8-speed automatics came out, the 10-speed automatics came out, that really separated not only fast and powerful, but efficient use of power. That is when things got incredibly interesting in the theater that we are playing in today. So I'm going to stop right there with the Hellcat, because we all know that the Hellcat, from a stock point of view, is basically the yardstick that everybody is gunning for. I mean, we're not talking about specific heads, cam, intake setups with a vet. I was that guy. I would go sniping after Hellcats with my vet, but I didn't bother with anybody else. And that's kind of the point. I mean, you can't. That is the highest compliment that you can actually afford somebody. Like, I am specifically going after what I consider to be the most powerful muscle car out there, and it was in stock form. So when I'm saying that about the vet that I had the vets after I had the Vipers. When I'm saying that about the vet, it's not a knock on the Hellcat. It's not me going out there picking on the Hellcat. It was me saying, look, there's just not a lot out there that's going to hang with this car, and I want to play with the stuff that's fast. So, and of course, you know, those were some of the most fun races. But getting back to it, though, I want to talk about what was considered fast. See, back in the modern era, back in the golden era of muscle cars, a mid 13-second car was considered to be fast. Like, they called those supercars. That is 383 and in some cases 440 B-body Mopar territory. It's faster than any of the small block Chevelles, Malibus, things like that. They just weren't going to be there, guys. Sorry, it just wasn't like that. It's considerably faster than pretty much any offering from Ford at the time, give or take a hit here or there, Boss 429s and things like that. But it, you know, again, we're talking about old tires and all of that. But the fact of the matter is that even on a slick, these cars would struggle to get into the mid to even low 13-second range. And that's even with a 4-speed manual, which in most cases was quicker than the automatic, primarily due to torque converter tightness. But that's on a slick with a competent driver. And even the fastest versions back then would do very well to get into the 11s. And we're talking stripped down Hemi Savoys. We're talking LS6 Chevelles that have been completely gutted. We're talking basically cars that you would maybe drive on the street, but were a little bit not streetable. What does all that mean? What am I driving at? Okay, well, what I'm driving at is this. Take an 1970 SS 396 Chevelle. Not an L79, just a regular 396 Chevelle. What were they? 370 horse, whatever the number was. Take that car and put it up against a 5.7 Challenger. And let's see what the outcome would be. Strangely enough, whether it would be on a drag strip or on a dyno or whatever, if you're only looking at horsepower numbers, that big block is going to have its hands full trying to deal with anything that 5.7 would put out. And when you consider that the 5.7s will regularly run pretty comfortably in the 13, especially if you put a tire on them, it makes you think about, well, how fast is fast? I mean, you guys have heard me ask that before. You know, how fast is fast? And at what point are you completely satisfied with your decision to mod to that certain point, if you've even modded at all? Well, in this case, you take a bone stock Challenger, you put it up against these classics, these untouchables, really, if you want to be honest, because it's one of these scenarios where, you know, it's a car where how dare you compare your corporate 5.7 against this hallowed ground known as the big block Chevelle. Well, the reality is that what was considered fast then is really considered commonplace today. You know, one of the funnier things that I remember reading, and it's been years ago, was some magazine took one of the C1 Corvettes. I think it was like wasn't a 60, it might have been a 59 or 57 Corvette. And they put it up against a minivan. I think it was a Honda Odyssey. Like I say, it's been quite a few years ago. And the Odyssey just mopped the floor with this vet. I mean, it wasn't even close. It wasn't even nice, honestly. And you'll see similar comparisons to small block Corvettes from, I think there was one done from 65 or 66. They took a 66 small block vet and put it up against some, like a Corolla or a Camry or something like that. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, and the vet just gets absolutely destroyed. I mean, and I don't really like using terms like that, but I mean, that's the reality of what world we're living in. I mean, it just is, right? So anyway, obviously fast has kind of morphed, but when guys are talking about fast cars and what, you know, these stories from back in the day, you almost have to pause for a minute and remember that, you know, although the cars weren't as fast, that was fast for the time. And so, you know, the noise was still there. All the tire smoke was still there. And of course, you start mixing in the fact that the thing has got terrible brakes, handling that is pretty much, I mean, steering that's slow, handling that sucks. The engagement factor is so much more real that the entire experience feels so much more raw and real. So, you know, is that part of what makes something fast? Is it the experience? You know, it's kind of like when you're riding a roller coaster, the ricketiness, the loudness of it. Yeah, it's predictable with what it's going to do, but it's still kind of sketchy. Is this thing going to fly off the tracks? That's kind of what life was like with some of those older cars. And I can speak to this just with Sierra. And the funny thing is the Sierra is a fantastic driving truck, but at the same time, I mean, damn, the brakes aren't awesome. The big part of that is no overdrive. There are so many other things that would aid that truck, and of course, by association, those older cars, you know, had they had the modern equivalent in transmissions. And so that was the other wraparound portion of that conversation. Again, just kind of bringing you guys in, letting y'all have a kind of seat at the table with this conversation that we were having. The question was, well, you know, how would those cars back then, leaving everything alone, How would those cars run if you put an HP 90 behind, a big, like an LS6 454 Chevelle? Or what if you took, one of the 6-speed automatics and put that behind, or 10-speed rather, automatics, or the 6-speed, doesn't matter, and put that in, say, a Mach 1, from back in the day, 351 Cleveland Mach 1. How much more efficient and how much faster would they be with that more efficient transmission assembly? I mean, who knows, right? I mean, nobody's going out and making kits to swap in modern transmissions. The best you could hope for is, a 4-speed equivalent, just so you get the overdrive. But I guess the point of all of that is, when you look at just the basis of the technology that we have today, and just how fast these cars are, numbers wise, it's easy to have your mind blown by comparison. But the argument to all of this is that they're just not as engaging to drive. Perfect example, the 2 girls I got sitting behind me. Revlon is fun in that Revlon will get to 140 miles an hour like that. Revlon gets to 140 miles an hour really quickly. She gets to 130 real quick, basically in about 10 seconds. Foxy doesn't do that, but I tell you what, you'll feel every pulse of the engine in this thing. You'll hear every little rattle. You're overwhelmingly aware of the fact that the connection to the road is not quite what it is with Revlon. Although I will say that I will pitch Foxy into corners and drift Foxy through corners and not have a second thought about it, because it is more responsive in terms of handling. But that extra responsiveness, well, read into that twitchy, and that platform isn't. I could cruise all day at 150 miles an hour in Revlon. I wouldn't want to go near 150 miles an hour in Foxy. But again, that's part of the experience. Is the fastness of it the overall experience? Because if that's the case, Foxy's faster than Revlon. The experience that you get is much more visceral and real and raw. The throttle response out of Foxy, and keep in mind, Foxy's a low compression 351 with the only added benefit of having a GT40 intake manifold on it, and that's really there just to maintain that mission statement of abrupt throttle response. So you take that aspect of driving the car, plus just the theater of doing like partial throttle rolling second gear burnouts with it. Well, Revlon doesn't really do that. I mean, she does. It'll haze the tires through third gear. But the thing is that it just doesn't give that visceral, raw, immediate connection to the car, which by association is like immediate connection to your surroundings, because no nannies, no way to bail you out in this thing. Makes you a lot more engaged in the driving experience, which means that the thing feels a lot faster than it is. Whereas Revlon, and by association, a lot of the cars that I've driven like her, especially the higher modified cars, are a lot faster than they feel. I'll give you a perfect example of this just in terms of how stable the LX platform is. You know, one of the big knocks on the Mopars is that they're big and heavy, and my big response to that big argument is, yeah, they're based off of a car, the E-Class and the S-Class family of sedans, basically. It shares parts from both. Those cars are designed to run wide open down the Autobahn until they run out of gasoline, all right? So because of that, they're incredibly stable going down the road. But that stability kind of numbs the effect of, or the sense of speed. So I'll give you guys a story, a real good example of this. So I delivered Racer X's car to him in Dallas. This was after we did the E85 conversion, big pumps, interkiller, chiller, iller, and the it was on the 85, and my whole goal was to see what kind of fuel economy I could get out of the car. I'd already done all the load testing on the car. It did its thing on the dyno. The car would accidentally run a number each and every time. That car just wants to make a big number, so it did every single time. So I'm running the car up to him, and it's about a 4-hour drive. I get a phone call saying, "Hey man, how's that thing running?" I said, "Man, it's going good. I'm averaging." It was a 19.2 mile per gallon average, and I mean, I was driving it like just barely my foot on the throttle. I was right at 74 miles an hour. Everything was cool. And he said, "Well, how does it feel on the highway?" I said, "Man, it feels great. I'm getting 19.2 is what I was getting at the time. So it's 19.2, no complaints." He goes, "Well, how stable is it under hard acceleration?" I said, "Well, I mean, it's about as stable as the thing's going to be on street tires on the street," which he understood to be, it's stable, but it'll light the tires up. And he goes, "Well, give me your impressions." I said, "All right, I'll hit it and I'll give you my impressions as I'm on it." There's something to be said for a car that will do rolling burnouts up to about 130 miles an hour. The car was actually given a slight wag as I was cresting 130 miles an hour up to about 135. So, well, it runs great. It ruined my video game of trying to get the best fuel economy. It knocked an entire point off of my fuel economy number. But anyway, that'll give you an idea for the difference between, what is fast, but you don't feel the fast. 135 miles an hour in that car, and I'm making just slight, just very, the slightest of adjustments. The car's still spinning, but it's just kind of, it's like, whatever. I got a little bit less traction, but whatever. We're just going to keep going straight and accelerating. If you were to do something like that in a Fox body Mustang or any of the older cars from back in the day, I mean, that's the textbook recipe on how you go, sliding all over the, Central Texas field. So, anyway, let me check in with you guys real quick. Let's see. Chris checking in and saying, "What up, Mason? What up, Chris?" Molten Mopar is in saying, "I'm in no tire, by the way." Oh, man. I'll hit you up, brother. CFL got the arm flex. I like it. Mark saying, "Hey Mason, my friend's trying to pick up a 5th or 6th gen Camaro SS, and I'm leaning towards a 6.1 Hemi. Any quick advice on mods that'll get him in to see Mopar taillights and shut his mouth? He's cocky." Right out of the bat, that's going to be a tough race for that. The 5th gen for sure. The 6th gen, a little bit different story. 6th gen is going to be pretty quick. You got to remember that the LS is the darling of the aftermarket. So he's got the advantage of every modification you can think of being very easy to get their hands on. So you're talking intakes, you're talking exhaust. Everybody on the planet can tune one of those things. But if you're just going to go stock for stock and really not take it much further than that, if he gets a 5th gen, I think you'll be fairly safe. But if he gets that 6th gen, it's going to be tough. MotoX saying Ditto Motors, Coma, California. Monterey Amy saying, "What's up, B?" Racetrack saying, "What's up, buddy? Hope things are going well." Man, I was just talking about you and your car, the difference between what is fast and what feels fast, brother. Sean E checking in saying, "Hey, what's up, man? Thank you very much for the contribution. 03 Cobra was a turning point. Also, these modern autos add speed and remove connections." Yeah, they kind of do, man. MotoX saying, "Not my ride, but another hardcore Ditto customer with car and shop installing another cam to get 1,000 plus. Pistons definitely not stock." You can start playing with those numbers. Yeah, you might want to start looking at rotating assemblies, although the Hellcats are pretty durable. Chuck saying, "What I love about a Challenger RT Plus Shaker besides the performance is that Dodge maintained the classic muscle car vibe. Used to drive a 9650, not even close to as sweet as my Challenger." Well, it's been 96 and a 50. I had a 96 GTS, and I love that car. Shotty saying, "Welcome to another edition of Midweek with Mason." I like it. Let's see. Madera's asking, would putting a 460 into a 90s F-150, or would the motor way too much for the truck? No, there's a lot of guys that did big block swaps back then. In fact, the later models, the fuel-injected models, you'd see, You see some guys playing with those. Those you can get as an option in the 3/4 ton trucks, but I mean, you can put one in there. I just don't know why you'd want to. Main reason for that is you can get a ton of power out of a small block, and it's already there. To make a big block, especially a big block Ford, work, you're going to take a little bit of that paper, and it's going to be a little bit of a headache, whereas the small block stuff is already very well sorted out, so I would certainly stick with that. I wouldn't even waste my time with a big block, to be honest. Chuck saying, I think your comparison nails it right on the head with why I like my Challenger better than my old Mustang 5.0. Driving experience is way better in exhaust note, etc. For sure, man. Again, Sean, thank you very much, brother. Let's see. BX is asking, how much horsepower would you gain on E85? Man, that depends a lot on, you know, are you naturally aspirated? Are you talking about the Hellcat? Naturally aspirated, typically not much. Unless you've got a dedicated build for E85, you're just not going to see a lot. You'll see some torque, but you won't see a lot of horsepower. You might see, 10 as far as horsepower, but you can pick up as much as 15 foot-pounds of torque, especially on the hit. For boosted, boosted's another story because, see, here's the thing. Naturally aspirated, you are sucking in the air and the fuel. I mean, yeah, it's fuel injected, but the fuel injector fires and you're sucking in that fuel as it's in the pocket, so to speak, in that, in your runner, if you want to call it that, sitting right on top of your intake valve. The problem you run into is when you hit a car with E85, you're using 30% more fuel. And that fuel takes up the same space that air normally would take up, and that's the problem. With forced induction, you're cramming air. Those rotors are turning on that supercharger, it's jamming the air and anything else in the intake tract along with it into that cylinder. So you can make better use of it with a forced induction application than you can with naturally aspirated, unless, there's a big point though, unless you've got the compression to manage it. If you've got the compression to roll with it, then you can make that E85 work pretty good on a naturally aspirated engine. But you got to have compression. Chuck saying Race Strikes is awesome. I've had some great live chats with him. Absolutely is. Race Strikes saying, let's be honest, you did a 250-mile burnout from Houston to Dallas. Bro, okay, so check this out. I was so into this fuel economy run that it's like, damn it, I don't want to do this. Because I was trying to hit that 20 number. But believe me when I tell you, the car would have easily been able to cover a 250-mile burnout. No problem. The thing is, though, is that the car is stable, and that's really the point to it. The car, the funny thing about it is that when you start talking about these cars, that it doesn't remove driver skill. The stability of the platform only means that it will maintain a track at high speeds. It's not going to get buffeted. The suspension geometry and the rest of the suspension components are there to manage those types of speeds. But the interesting thing about it is that when you start getting into cars where you roll into the throttle and you don't realize that the tires are hazing. Look, this flew up my face. That's when you know you've got something that's making a lot of power. So, yeah, for sure, she can do a 250-mile burnout. Johnny's saying, B, you have a great bookend with Revlon and Foxy, best of both worlds. I'll tell you what, I'll have to agree with that. The funny thing, and you guys have seen the dyno chart on Foxy, it's just torque, and then, oh yeah, we got to make some horsepower eventually. There are other intakes that I could run with this thing, would probably be quite a bit better. The street heat comes to mind. Something was still a long runner, but just better port design, especially better runner design. 4 of the 8 cylinders on this thing are getting kind of a funky runner shape to them. It's just not all that great. But at lower air demand RPMs, lower RPMs, it does really well. So, but yeah, lots of fun. Absolute laughter-inducing contraption sitting right behind me, and then Revlon is just a dirty girl, and I love her. Race Rex saying thank you, Chuck. Chuck's saying, oh, Racer X is here. Yeah, he is. Shawnee's asking Racer X, hanging out with Racer X. See, Nathan's saying, good evening, D. My dad owns a 65 Grand Sport Buick, bored to a 413. Think it runs 1160s with the mods. That thing scared the hell out of me for a lot of years. He loves my 2020 Scat 392. And see, that's a really good example. So, and I mean, you guys know I like a lot of the, I'm not going to say obscure, but I like the Mopars. I've always loved Buicks. That was the other thing, man. GS Stage 1, dude, GSXs, nasty cars. You know, the 400s or 455s, primarily the 455s, were just nasty. You know, Pontiacs, I love Pontiacs. Anyway, you know, those cars were monsters for their day. And, you know, with everything that you can do to them, you can get them into the mid-11s. And don't get me wrong, mid-11s is fast. Real fast, as a matter of fact, which is why it kind of blows my mind. You know, guys are, you know, talking about really turning up the wick on the 392s, and like, guys, man, you realize that the 392 is so good at what it does, and you cannot compare the power numbers that thing makes to the older cars. I mean, you can accidentally run mid-11s with one of those things with just a tune and a tire. So, yeah, certainly it's certainly an eye-opener. But if you ever get the chance, though, here's the thing. It's all about the driving experience. You know, I can talk about the numbers all night long, but the numbers are skewed. Again, we're talking transmission technologies are the big part of it, by the way. When you start talking about the transmission technologies, you're talking about a 3-speed or a 4-speed compared to a 5, 6, 8-speed transmission, 10-speed transmissions now. That's where things start to get, you know, the line is incredibly blurred there. Can you really compare the two when the transmissions don't even really allow for a strong, or at least a apples to apples comparison? Something else to think about too, you know, something like the Buick, the 455, lots of torque, real strong out of the hole, and they needed that torque because they didn't have the multiple gear multiplication that we have today. And they're an interesting car to drive. They're snappy, they're real responsive. There's a certain feeling driving a big block that you just don't get in any of the modern cars, except for maybe, you know, a 392 Challenger or Charger and the Hellcats. There's just something that's missing unless you get into one of those two cars. And the experience is significantly different than what the smaller engines are that are out there. And that includes the 6.2. The 6.2 is not that far behind it. It's just that, you know, it comes with this fairly weak cam from the factory, at least by comparison to, you know, what's in the 392. Damn good set of heads though, man. LS3 with a freaking cam is lights out. But I digress. X is saying, what's with the new Camaros essentially being non-existent in comparison to the Challenger and Charger and Mustang? Why is the car just not as good of a performer? Well, the thing is that it is a good performer, and you can make them faster than stink. I mean, you know, George Let's Be is a great example of that. I mean, you got a guy that's running basically mid-9s with a full house Gen 6 on the dope. I mean, that thing is quick, fast, and in a hurry going to get your attention. But the reason why you don't see too many of them out there is because the Camaro represents the bottom of a triangle. What I mean by that is you've got Mustang here, you've got Challenger here. Let's say, you know, a performance pack here and a Scat pack shaker here. They're going to offer up the yin and the yang of a driving experience. The Scat pack is going to be punchy out of the hole, real plucky. It's going to be strong through the 8th mile, strong through 3/4 track. It's not going to have the top end that the Mustang's going to have, but the Mustang is going to have to reel it in to actually beat it. Mustang's going to have better top end performance. It's the ergonomics in the Mustang and in the Challenger are both very good in two completely different areas, where the Mustang's nice and tweaked and the Challenger is going to be more comfy. a little bit more muscle car-y in its layout. So all of that taken into account, you've basically completed the yin and the yang. The Camaro doesn't do a better job of it doesn't do a good job of being more Mustang than Mustang. And if it outhandles it, it's only in a very specific environment. We're talking on a closed course. But the interior, the ergonomics is the least of the crew, and that's big for a lot of drivers. As a matter of fact, a lot of those drivers are female. A lot of them, damn near half that buy Mustangs and Camaros, at least are going to be influenced by a female. And I think, I don't know, you guys fact check the demographics on chicks to dudes, but I'm pretty sure you start looking at the Mustang, it's coming up right up, you know, it's going to scare 50-50, right? Well, Challenger might not be quite that, I don't know, chick focused, but here's the thing. When you compare the two, the Mustang is a lot easier to drive. It doesn't have the visibility issues. The ergonomics are better. All of those things those two completely make a difference. But here's the other thing. When you start looking at the SS, it doesn't have it's not as muscle car-y as a Challenger, to coin a phrase. It doesn't have that punch. It doesn't have the snappiness that the Scat Pack would have. So when you drive one, you're left a little bit wanting, especially if you have already driven a Scat Pack. If you get out of that car and then drive the Scat Pack is going to feel like it's got about another 40 or 50 cubic inches on that 6.2 liter, even though the engines are relatively similar in size. You're not buying a Scat Pack for handling. If you're buying a Scat Pack, you know you're about to be doing that car, okay? So the handling advantage becomes a moot point. Like, who cares? The Scat Pack will go around corners just fine. I've never just taken to flight and, you know, skated off of, a turn or an overpass. In fact, I've been pleasantly surprised at how, the heavy Hellcat was able to hold its own and actually hold a line at some speeds that, I mean, it didn't push, didn't do anything. And that's some real long, nice sweeping on-ramps, off-ramps, some tough stuff, decreasing radius, things like that. The car's done just fine. But again, those were in a little bit more of an extreme condition, or at least an extreme circumstance. And the Camaro doesn't do better. I mean, the Camaro would still be on the road. The Challenger is still on the road. So I think you're understanding my point here. It doesn't do the muscle car thing as good as the Challenger, and it doesn't do the Mustang thing as good as the Mustang. It does a lot of things really well, and it takes to modifications like you would not believe, but you've got to own a car before you can modify the car. And chances are, if you're looking at a Camaro, you're also looking at the Mustang and the Scat Pack, and that is going to put you in one of two camps. You like the Scat Pack, those are guys that love the car the way that it is. They'll put a drag pack on it. They'll have it on stock tires. They'll put different rims on it, have it look the way that they want, but they love the fact that they can mat the throttle, do long smoky burnouts, makes a great sound, and it looks tough, it looks the part, and they're comfy as hell to chill in. I mean, we do road trips with Revlon, and it's nice. Or you're going to fall into the, I'm going to mod this thing camp, and that's where the Mustang comes into play. The darling of the aftermarket, when you look at it from, the most modern platforms, you can put one into the nines, albeit with a significant investment, but it's there for the taking should you choose that option. But it can be fast either way you choose to look at it. Naturally aspirated, modify it for blowers or whatever you want to do, or keep it the way that it is from the factory and have a very fun, sporty, responsive, great handling car. When you start to mix all that up and throw that into the gumbo, the flavor is distinctly not Camaro, and that's why they don't do as well. Hopefully I didn't wear you out with that explanation. Slash is saying, I want my 18 Charger Scat Pack louder and I deleted my mid mufflers. What could be my next step? Hearing aids. Now, if you want it louder, you could do, man, I just don't recommend this. You do a reso delete and then put a set of like bullet resonators at the back of it. Or you can do bullets where you did your delete and then do bullet resonators, which is basically just the small, and it'll sound good. It'll have a good tone to it. The problem is that these cars come from factory with an X pipe. And X pipes are raspy, they're shrill sounding. In fact, it wasn't that like a couple of weeks ago, I was loading a 392, which in fact is a real pretty wide body, but the guy had done basically full muffler delete setup on it, no reso, no mids. And I mean, God, the car was just, like, it wasn't loud in a good way. Like, I've heard loud in a good way. I mean, the Hellcat's pretty loud in a good way. Sierra is kind of loud, not really. It's got 40 series flows with a H pipe. It's not really loud, but it sounds good. You know, there's a certain sound that's just good. But with that X pipe, it's hard to get it right. It's hard to get that sound just right because of that shrill, like, I don't even know what. It's just a sharp, just a sound that they make. Or you could, if you wanted to be one of the cool kids, what you would do is you would cut the X pipe out of it and run an H pipe and then run bullets about 2 feet after the H pipe and then run straight pipes out the back. Check out my video if you want to see the reso delete, by the way. I've got a how-to on that reso delete. No Speeds checking in saying, what's up, man? Slash saying, Racer X and B Mason in the same live chat. Amazing. Racer X is good, man. Check out his stuff. If you're on my channel, you're on his too. I can almost guarantee it. Shawnee's saying, asking, how much boost do you need on a Hellcat until E85 is a benefit? I'm making 13, 14 pounds. Is E85 something I should do? Do I need to pull it up to reap the rewards? You will reap more rewards with the more airflow, the more boost that you run through that engine. Stock, you can pick up a little bit. If I played with the tune on this thing, I could put it into the 9s in DAs that are, say, 1,000 feet and lower. Probably 500 feet and lower. I could put that car into the 9s on E85. But you're able to get away with a lot more timing. For your purposes, I would say that E85 would be a little bit more beneficial. I would say that you would go from 10.0s, 10.1s to 980s on E85. But just know that there are some caveats to E85, especially with you living up north. You're going to be playing with more E70, E80 than really E85 for, I would say, about 3 to 4 months out of the year. Plus, you're kind of stuck with a dedicated E85 tune. So, at your boost level, that's kind of where it would start. And then from there, I would say the real benefit comes when you go double pulley. Innovators West lower with a 275 upper, 265 upper. That's when the benefits are going to be significantly more significant. No Speeds checking in saying, we're still tuning and adding stuff on my twin turbo Hellcat, but the pull on it at 21 pounds is amazing. Still haven't tuned it up yet. I would say be real careful with that. Because yes, you don't want to be playing around with 21 pounds. Chuck Rice saying, Brian, your track performance was sweet on the last video, 10.4 quarter mile Hellcat rules. That was actually Chris driving that car. That's why I'm actually filming that, because little Miss Sweetheart back here is still stuck in tire limbo. I think it's going to be, the latest date I want to say is the middle of November. But yeah, so that's a car that I tuned. That's Chris's full weight 2016 Challenger Hellcat. And when I say full weight, we're talking has front and rear strut tower brace, so it's actually overweight, is a sunroof car. The Bravado setup is his daily setup. He's got 2 sets, one for street, one for strip. That's obviously his strip setup, but again, still full weight. So when I say full weight, the car is actually the same weight as it was, maybe a little bit more than when it was made, when it was delivered, because of the bracing. But that is one of my tunes on 93 octane for a stock boost Hellcat with a 309 gear. And truth be told, his car technically on the dyno, and if you look at the data, this is corroborated by the data, by the way, his car does make more power than mine. So I'm so good. I tuned a car that's faster than mine. That's, you know, I'm joking when I say that. But yeah, it's fun because I get to play vicariously. But yeah, he and I will actually go at each other pretty good. You know, he and I will both cut the same 60 foots, but he is murder on the tree, by the way. God, murder. So my wife and I have, this is like sidebar, my wife and I have taken to watching Heart to Heart, well, of course they're reruns, but Heart to Heart. And if you never saw that, it was this show back in the early 80s where this rich guy has got his, you know, hot wife, and they go solving murders, but the only problem is that people are always trying to mug them or shoot them or stab them at their house. And anyway, part of the intros, they met, it was anyway, it was, sorry, squirrel. And Sean's asking, how fast does a Hellcat have to be before 262 gears start looking better than 309s? Well, there's kind of a sine wave that floats in and out of that. So stock 309 is better. I would say at somewhere around like a 10% lower 275 upper, you might start dipping back down into that 262 might just be easier to work with. But you're into that area where you don't want to launch it in second. You're not making quite enough power to launch in second. You're still launching in first. But that's kind of the low part of that sine wave. So it'd be 309 and then 262 right up until you start hitting it with a shot of dope. And then from there, you may want to have the 309 and just launch in second. And then pop the shifter over. And when you pop the shifter over, unless you're going to just hammer the thing on the gas out of the hole, that's when you go ahead and you can either activate it on the timer, you can manually activate it, or however you want to do it at that point. So again, kind of a sine wave as to how much power you're running and how you're going to launch the car. Rule of thumb is if you're making any more than about, say, 850 to 900 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno, you probably want to be the 262 route. Get up to around the 1200 horsepower range, it might be a little bit better to have the 309 back in it. Mark the Mark's asking, saying, thanks for the heads up. I'm still repping the Mopar flag, whether that's LS eats me alive or not. Absolutely, man. Look, there's a lot of fast everythings out there. I'm still rocking Mopar. Chuck Rice checking in saying, I love my 5.7 and I know I can mod it down the line, but it actually is fast as it is stock. That's what I've been saying, guys. Look, for those that just don't know, I mean, what sucks about the 5.7 is that there is a 6.4. And what I mean by that is it's real difficult to express how quick a 5.7 Charger or a 5.7 Challenger can be just right out of the box. Especially when you start looking at quarter mile times and how the thing gets down the road and how it does things just in general. And I know this because I drive my truck every single day, and it's a 5.7. And I love it. And it does stuff that's fun, and it gets down the road great, shits and gets, right? So, you know, I try to express to guys, like, look, there are so many things that you can do with a 5.7 and have a riot with the thing and never even worry about a 392 or a Hellcat or a Mustang or a Camaro, whatever. You get all the theater, you get all the fun, you get all the loud, you get all the tire smoke, you get all the noise, and you get it in a platform that's easier on parts, cheaper to buy, easier to insure, the whole kit and caboodle. You get that with the 5.7. Plus, you know, let's say you get the thing paid off, or you get to a point where you can afford a supercharger, you want to do some modifications or something like that. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit expensive, but modding anything is expensive. And the reality is that it'll take to whatever mods just fine. So Yeah, the 5.7 sits in kind of the Goldilocks area for the Mopar guys. It's and what I mean by that is that everything is kind of just right. This is the point where there's no middle here. You're starting out just right, and you progressively through the 392 take this little dip where it's like, I don't know if you really want to mess with that too much, and then you get to the Hellcats, and then it's you sneeze on the thing and you pick up 30 horsepower. So Ethan saying, hey B, I hope all is well. Hope all is well with you, Ethan. Saying, what's the deal with the Viper's return and all the rumors? Also, I still have yet to see a single GT500 hit the strip here in San Antonio. Hellcats, on the other hand, are killing it. Well, let's run that one back here. The deal with the Viper's return, all the rumors. Look, I can only tell you what I was told, and I was told that, what was that, 2016, 2015? No, it's 2016. And that's when I had the chance to hang out with the marketing team from FCA over at Mecum. The rumor mill, if you were to believe anything from what they were telling me, unless the rumor mill includes naturally aspirated and supercharged variants of the Hellcat platform, basically 392 and or 6.2 supercharged, then there's really not really much else to chat about. There was a lot of talk when he was saying, look, the Viper is going away. I mean, this thing's a done deal. There was a lot of talk about ditching the V10, bringing in an automatic. There's a lot of things that they're going to, again, if that conversation, let's say if any of that conversation alluded to some semblance of truth, you would be looking at basically a very Corvette-y product, but still yet have the power, the upgrades, the upshot of the Hellcat power and everything else in something that looks like a Viper. But they've got to be able to make that vehicle transcend gender, and that was the biggest issue that they had was, I think it was a 96%, 98% male driven purchases. In other words, it was get that son again? It was guys that were buying them. And that's a bit of a problem because when you look at the brand of Corvette, I want to say it's like 30% or something like that, but that represents a huge difference in terms of revenue. I mean, when the girls want to have something and the girls go out and buy that thing, that's when you've got a winner. And so that was the direction that they were looking at with the Viper. Now, what they come out with, I don't know, man. Who knows? I mean, we're still reeling from whatever rumor mill was trying to, regurgitate, what it is, the CUDA, right? That it was the new Viper, then it was something else. It's based on this platform, that platform, and it's just all it is rumors. People basically saying something, hoping that it sticks, and if it sticks, they'll say, "I told you." I mean, that's okay. I'll go on. Okay, the Viper is going to be built on the LX platform. It's going to be a modified, lowered, shortened, widened version of the LX platform, and it's going to have a V8. So if any of that BS lands and it hits home, then I guess I win, right? We don't really know. They're not releasing it, but I can only tell you what I was told by the marketing staff and the guy. Yeah, it was like a 2-hour long conversation. So I guess the main takeaway from all of that was you got this sense of just exasperation from the guy. Like, look, in fact, he was the guy that they had a white, which was like my car. They had a white GTS sitting there. He's like, I'll sell it to you for $86,000. And I said, well, I put my order already in on the SRT. And he goes, I'll cancel it. I mean, we'll take your $500, put it towards the Viper. We'll do it right now. I said, man, look, I appreciate the deal, but again, I can't afford it. And he goes, that's the problem. And this is coming from a 3-time Viper owner. I'm a recovering Viper owner over here. And he's saying he was lamenting the fact that they had lost their core buyers. They had lost the folks that had supported the brand, the Viper brand, early on. And for me, that would have been 2000, 2002, 2004. and he's saying, look, you know, we're not seeing that recidivism. You know, we're not seeing these guys turn over Vipers the way you do Corvettes. I mean, Corvette guy will buy a Corvette every 3 years, every 4 years. They just keep rolling in and, you know, rolling the things over. So they just weren't seeing that with the Viper, and that's a huge reason why it got kicked out. Because trust me, if you don't have brand loyalty in that respect for those types of cars, those things will not last very long. CFL's checking in saying, I drive my 1320 with skinnies and Mickey Thompson R's, and it handles remarkably well. It's a Challenger, not a Vet. So I used to run Revlon around, you know, this time of year. Normally, if I had tires, it'd be on the drag pack all the time. And it does a great job. They do really well. So, I mean, I can't complain. Eerily well. But I'm also running the radials, and I'm also running the Mickey Thompson runners. What are they, 28 6s or something like that, 28 7s, whatever they are. Anyway, they're a little bit on the heavy side, but they're incredibly stable, and that's what I like the most about them. Queasy's saying hearing aids. Oh yeah, I guess that's where we're at. Yeah. Frosh saying, get some electric cutouts. They don't get much louder than that. That's true. God, we did want it. So we did a Mustang with those cutouts, and one of the problems with those cutouts, people don't realize this, is that those little motors can go bad. And a lot of times, and you're buying this stuff, it's not even, it's like made in Antarctica or something. I mean, China don't even want to make it. It's so cheap the way some of this stuff is made. And the motors will sketch out a little bit, so you get one of them that'll just stop opening at like 3/4 or halfway or whatever. Just pick a number, pick a fraction, right? It's so they just sound like ass. Anyway, it's pretty funny, but that's some of the stuff you see working at a shop. Braxton's asking, this may sound dumb, but how can you tell if your car has a higher stall converter? Well, normally the guy that sells you the car will tell you, hey, by the way, it's got a converter. It depends on the converter, though. The car may feel a little bit mushy at low speeds. You may not even feel the 1-2 shift, but when you get on it, you really feel the shifts hitting hard. That's indicative of a higher stall speed. I mean, there's just a way that the car feels. It'll just feel, again, under partial throttle, kind of lazy. And the easiest way to do it is just to put your foot on the brake and just slowly roll into the throttle and just watch your tach. If it's got a tachometer, which I'm assuming we're talking about a later model, just watch the tach, and as the tach comes up, when does the car really start trying to push through the brakes or start spinning the tires? Don't just mat the throttle. You know, roll into the throttle real soft, and you know, if the thing just keeps climbing past about 3,000 RPM, it probably has a converter in it, an aftermarket converter. Jamie's asking, will an H-pipe hurt horsepower or torque when compared to the X? No, it won't. No, as a matter of fact, when I did a ton of exhaust testing a long time ago. In fact, it was with Fox Bodies. And I tested X pipes. I tested H pipes. I tested with cats with an X, with cats with an H, no cats, with the whole bit. Power chamber stuff, everything. The exhaust setup that made the most power was the H pipe. And this is, again, Fox Body stuff, but it was the H pipe with no cats made the most power. The next pipe that made the most was the pipe that's actually on the car now, which was an H pipe with the big high flow cats, which was like having no cats at all. After that was the X, and then the X with cats actually made less power than the factory pipes did. So to give you an idea, that's kind of how everything shook out with those particular tests. But, you know, but again, I mean, I'm saying it made more average power. The X, or that made more peak power. The X, though, would make better power down low. The H pipe would make better power up top, and on rolling, on the initial hit, the H pipe would make a little bit more power down there. So, like if the H pipe made a little bit more power on the hit, a little bit less mid-range, a little bit more up top, that's basically how it worked out. They basically just kind of traded spots on their way up. But when I say one made more than the other, wasn't by much. The only one that was, you can really tell a difference, was the catted X-pipe. And that was a brand new catted X-pipe. Should have done well, but for some reason it just didn't. Chuck saying, I thought you were driving. No, I've got a boatload of me driving videos. I wanted to get Chris on there. Yeah, that's just showing one of the cars that I've tuned. But yeah, 001 red light. I know somebody else on this chat has hit a 001 red light. You know who I'm talking to. Gallus is saying, how do you feel about the Mustang GT PP1 as compared to the Scat Packer 1320? It's a good car. Performance pack, nice setup. I damn near bought one. That's how much I liked them. You know, talking about the Scat Packer, the 1320, man, it just depends on what you're going to do with it, brother. I mean, look, if you're going to go out and take the car to the drag strip and you're going to leave it basically stock, you're going to put it on a drag pack, get out there, have a ball with the car, eat you a couple of track dogs, you know, flirt with some skirts, you know, grab you a Frito pie and then hit the road. That's, you can do that with both of the cars. For me, I would prefer the 1320 only because that is the car that is most recent in my mind when Ray and I took his drop dead pretty Frostbite Blues 1320 and we made hits on that thing for about 2 hours one night. Absolutely loved that car. So much fun. The sound, everything. The comfort level, everything about that car, just absolutely fell in love with it. So for me, I would say 1320 first. You know, probably the Mustang second, just because Mustang stuff. I mean, the thing I like about the Mustang is that if it depends, again, it depends on what you're going to do with the car. I just mentioned drag racing, but that's not the only fun thing that you can do. You might want to do autocross. You might want to do closed course. The Mustang can do those things equally as well and be competitive. So again, just all depends on what you're going to be up to with it. But I think you guys know where I would go. That's that 1320. Anthony's asking, what do you think about the bearings in the Supercharger? I have an 18. I'm looking to do upper and lower pulleys. Is that a concern? Is it overkill? No, you're in good shape. Well, I say that. I know that multiple Mopars has had a different experience with this, but the way that I gather it from build dates of around, I would say March of 2015, March or April of 2015, and I think it ended probably the mid portion, probably around June or May of 2016. That, I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, that was the span, that was the time frame, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm that far off. That was the span where IHI had a problem with the bearing supplier for the Superchargers. It wasn't the first run, and I know that some 15s and some 16s ran into that problem. It was kind of hit or miss, but there was a bit of a rash there. After that, I'm not aware of too many that have had any failures, aside from some demons and red eyes. For some reason, I don't know. But anyway, just to give you an idea, that's where that's really kind of where those fall in line. Killer Collins said, hey Mason, would say that the 373 rear end makes a bigger difference on a Challenger 5-speed car than an 8-speed car. Well, it would make the same difference if both of them had 309 gears. I think that the 370 option is a much more appropriate gear for the 5-speed autos. It gets you closer to that much more aggressive first gear that you'll find in the 8-speed, and it doesn't really, it's not a big detriment up top, not with the size wheel and tire that you have. I mean, you'll be turning 2,400 RPM-ish at about 80 miles an hour, well underneath any NVH issues that you might have on long trips. I would say, I'll even go so far as to say this. I think that it's criminal that gear wasn't offered in the 5-speed cars, the NAG1 cars, just in general. I mean, it just livens the car up so much. Now, if you put that 370 in an 8-speed car, there are some things to consider. Number one, a 5.7 is going to be lively with that gear with an 8-speed. A 392 is a little bit of overkill, and it's really only usable at the drag strip. But 5.7, you can kind of get away with it, and it's not that much different than running the trucks. You know, the trucks have the 392 gear, 3.92 rear end, with the 5.7 and the 8-speed. That's a standard option. But you take that same truck, like perfect example. This is Ernesto's truck. Seen me or heard me mention him before. You know, you put the smaller wheel and tire setup on that truck, and it's basically the same, very similar to what you'd have in your Challenger or Charger 5.7. So yeah, getting down the track does just fine. Driving around does great. Again, I think it's criminal that they didn't offer that with the NAG1s. But again, you can also run them with the HP70s as well. Just be a little bit more violent out of the hole. Could potentially mess with some tuning, but I think it'd be all right. Madera's asking, are aftermarket exhausts with air valves to regulate the sound of a custom car worth the extra money? Well, I mean, okay, 392s and Hellcats come with that from the factory. Is it worth the money? It's a gimmick. They're non-adjustable, unfortunately. I mean, you can't just flip a switch the way you can with the Mustang. That kind of brings forth the art form of the automotive culture, and that's something that kind of does that. So I'm kind of cool with that. So I'm kind of inclined to spend money on stuff like that. But when it comes to, you know, would I buy it, like the open exhaust flaps or anything like that? No, not really, because it just gets too loud. I mean, it's just, I can't really have fun with that. But that's, in terms of power, no, they won't make any more power, but they do make things sound more fun. KB's asking, what kind of gears do you have in the Fox body? They are 373s. It is a truck carrier, 31 spline carrier as well. So it's a 31 spline carrier, 373s, track lock, just a normal clutched limited slip, and that's it. That's what she's got. A little bit too much gear, to be honest with you. The car would probably do a little bit better with 355s, in my opinion. Just because, again, initial tip-in torque is just real aggressive with that car. Speed Freaks saying, I see guys pushing to get that 890 quarter mile and a Hellcat, then what? Better have a quick car you can enjoy on the street. It's just a number and a dollar amount. Well, see, that's the thing. You know, there, like, multiple Mopars has a car that would be a great street car, even with the fact that it's probably be running 8s, right? So there, you can do it, but again, like you say, I mean, you're right. It's a dollar amount. It's cubic dollars at that point. And well, I say that it doesn't really take all that much. Well, yeah, I guess in a way it does. E85, pulleys, tune, exhaust, I mean, the whole bit, everything really does start to add up quickly, but it can be done. And I think that's really the point, is you can, with the Hellcats, you can have something that's that fast that you could run on the street. Now, it's, if you wanted to do it and have a streetable version of that car, the recipe would look something like this. Hellcat, 275 lower, 265 upper, 10% lower, obviously E85, and Nokia cat delete pipe, and I'd probably hit it with a $150 shot. That would get you awfully close to that number. I mean, you'd be roughly 950s on boost only. Hit it with a $150 shot, that would probably put you closer to like a 920 ish range. So right there, just basically scaring 8s. And if you really wanted to try to rustle up that number. Obviously, at that point, you're looking at weight reduction and then hit it with a 200 shot. So it would still technically run the number, but you wouldn't have the power on demand at all times unless you just ran around with a fully filled nitrous model. Chuck's saying, I can get a red eye when the time comes, but I actually prefer the 6-speed manual Hellcat, even though it has less horsepower. Not sure if I should go wide body or not. I tell you what, if you like 6 speeds and you like just the driving experience of a manual transmission, Hellcats, I mean, you can do worse than getting a Hellcat. I can assure you of that. My recommendation is to drive it. If you're going to get a car that's going to be a 6-speed, I think you'd almost have to go with a wide body, mainly because I don't know, it just seems to fit the look, the trans, all of that. I don't know, for some reason it kind of fits that car, but I don't know, maybe it's me, transamming it a little bit, but I think that would be a fun car. I know that I've panned the 6-speed manual Hellcats before. The problem that I had with the 6-speed manual is that it's a 226 first gear. I mean, what is first gear? That, you don't shift until 62 miles an hour or something like that. So anyway, it can be a little bit tough out of the hole, but again, for the guys that love manual transmissions and that's what they want to drive, they like those cars. So I'll have to rely on their judgment on that. Cody's saying, I keep saying FCA needs to bring back the SRT4. They had a chance to dominate the 4-cylinder market. Well, the thing is that they did dominate the 4-cylinder market for a long time in the 80s. In fact, it's funny because everybody would lament the fact that Dodge didn't have a muscle car. They didn't really develop the Aspen the way that they could have. There wasn't a Challenger or Charger per se, but you had the Omni GLH, you had the Daytonas, you had the ES, which was the 600, like the Turbo 600 little notchback coupe. That's what I had as my first car. Turbo 4-cylinders were the rage then, and it was something that was coming into its own. And strangely enough, that little ES would hold its own against V8 powered stuff. It was kind of weird, actually, in that respect. But the point of it is that you're right. I would like to still see Dodge do something a little bit nutty. I mean, they're already doing nutty stuff, right? Look at how popular cars like the GTI are. The hot hatch type of a car. It's a very European thing. I mean, and I love them, by the way. I mean, I cannot get enough of Volkswagen Rabbit stuff, Scirocco stuff. Any of the the Capris or any of that kind of stuff. I love anything like that. I guess for me, speaking of which, technically this is a hatchback. But anyway, I like, would I call it a hot hatch? I guess I can't because it's rear-wheel drive, or at least it's a Mustang. Anyway, I'm getting off point. I would love to see something like that, primarily because I love those types of cars. And it's cool when I see there's a crew of SRT4s that shows up to the drag strip down here fairly regularly, and it's just, I don't know, I just love seeing those guys show up. It just makes me smile. But they were saying the Mustang isn't a competitor to the Dodge. They're Dodge's big boys, and never really was, at least not in modern times. It's more closely matched to BMWs, and those are a little track, not drag cars. Yeah, the Mustang's a lot more like those, indeed, especially in their execution. The ergos in those things are amazing, by the way. Cody's saying, I need me an H-pipe for that low-end torque. They're not tough to make. In fact, I had an exhaust shop when I had my E63. I did a mid-muffler delete on my E63, mainly because of the freaking big-ass resonators that it had on it. I did a mid-muffler delete, and when he did the mid-muffler delete, I had him cut an H-pipe into the two pipes. It sounded really good. Actually, there's a video of that car on the dyno on my channel. If you go to my channel and go to the very bottom of the page in terms of videos, you'll see my old notchback. You'll see my Lightning, an interior shot of the Lightning going up to like 16 pounds of boost. and you'll see my Mercedes on the dyno. Braxton's checking in saying, love listening to these. Thanks for taking, talking about the converter. You just explained how exactly my 09 feels, and the dealer said it had wacky stuff done. I bet you that's one of them. It's probably either a Circle D or a Paramount converter. Anthony's checking in, and thank you for the kind words, by the way. Anthony's checking in saying, Chuck, get the wide body with the 6-speed. Yep, absolutely. He said, driven both with manual, wide body is better for the manual all day. I like it. Chuck's hanging out with Anthony. Let's see. Mark's saying, which supercharger is best if you want to hear the whine? I want a supercharged Hemi and can't afford any of the kitties, but I still want to hear a good whine when I'm gassing it. I would say go with the Edelbrock E-Force. It's got a Maggie 2650. It's a great supercharger. Looks clean. They're all a little bit of a pain in the ass to install, but probably one of the easier ones to install. And they make really good power, so that is the route that I would go. Go with the E-Force, you can't go wrong. I've driven the 5.7s with the E-Force, and they are sweet as a nut. Love driving those things. Cattle saying a 5.7 with an E-Force supercharger. Is it going to get better miles per gallon than the Scat Pack? It will get about the same mileage. No real difference there. Anthony's saying, I wasn't very clear, my bad. I mean the high-speed race bearings. Oh, I haven't come across anyone who has experience with them. Oh, yeah, I haven't, not sure about that. Everybody I know is running the regular stuff, doing just fine with them. And believe me when I tell you, it's not the bearings that you have to worry about at that point. If you're really spooling those things up, the bearings aren't your concern. It's rotor stability at that point. And yeah, but the problem is, okay, look, when you work at a shop, you know how, okay, I'll go through the thing again. So when you work at a shop, things that never, ever, ever, ever happen about 2 to 3 times a year. Things that rarely, if ever, happen, yeah, that'll happen about once a month. Things that are kind of known problems is stuff that basically is coming in every other day. So, I've seen a Whipple fly apart. Have never seen an IHI come apart. And I know guys that are running 10% lower with 250 uppers. And they're holding together pretty good. So, and that's on a stock Hellcat IHI. So, yeah, you just never know. But when they do come apart, it's not pretty. Anthony's saying go drive when you won't regret it. Absolutely. Talking about the wide body Hellcat. Chuck saying, I know the clutch is heavy in the Hellcat 6-speed, which is not the case in my RT Shaker 6-speed. Actually, they're not all that far off. Chuck saying, I don't mind a heavy clutch. Yeah, they're not bad. Brett saying, 6 speeds are fun, but you can't shift faster than the 8. Actually, you know, the good thing about the 6-speed is that it's really no longer the go-to for performance. That's a driving experience that you're looking for. So, and there's some stuff with the 6-speed, just some goofing around, hooning stuff that you learn to miss, especially if you're used to driving a manual transmission. Obviously, this wouldn't be your daily driver, because if you're used to driving a manual transmission as your daily, you're either glutton for punishment or you're waiting to get something with an automatic to have as your daily. But no, you can have a lot of fun with the 6-speed, no doubt about it. But you're right, you're just not going to, it's the gear ratios that you're just not going to get past, first of all, with that 8-speed. It's just so much more aggressive. Queen's saying, one thing I love about the new Mustang is that digital dash. Pretty sharp, isn't it? I like that too, man. I like that kind of stuff. And you know what else I like? And I'm surprised that they don't do this with our cars. But I like the changing of the ambient lighting. I don't know why. I just think that kind of stuff is kind of a cool thing. A little personal touch you can add. But yeah, I like that stuff. Cody's saying, Mustang's top end, though, are pretty crazy when built right. Yeah, it is. Yeah, those heads flow like you would not believe. I mean, our heads flow crazy numbers, but those heads flow crazy numbers for the displacement in that engine. I think, what are those things flow? I think they flow pretty close to what our heads flow. I think it's like I think the Coyote has, what do they flow, 330? I think our heads flow 340, but they're supplying, a significantly larger engine. Something like that. It's been a minute since I've even looked that up. Kevin saying, hey, I finally called Doc Diff. Oh, good. And spoke with Jesse. And let me tell you, I wish I lived in Texas. That would be my go-to shop just from talking to them. Was pretty knowledgeable. Yeah, they are. Yeah, those guys know their stuff. Get you squared away, get you put where you need to be, for sure. Pearl saying 16 manual 6 Scat pack. Not sure if it's an H pipe or X. I deleted both muffler and resonator, added glass pack muffler to it. Still kind of harsh. Think you recommended loudmouth bullet resonator. Is that correct? Well, if it's stock, you've still got an X pipe. I would say, was it loudmouth? Any bullet type resonator will be good. I mean, technically speaking, the glass packs is basically just one long resonator. So, yeah, any of those will work just fine, just to kind of chill it out and shut it up a little bit. But yes, any of the bullet resos will at least help you along the way. Anthony's saying, I will say that yes, the manual isn't as fast as the A8, but the smile you get rowing through the gears will make you forget about everything. Yeah, I mean, it's fast. The thing is that, again, fast is relative. We're talking about, what is fast and fast back then and fast now. Let me tell you something. If you're not racing somebody and you're just out playing, that's really what matters here. And yeah, it'd be great if you could, have a drag strip right down the street from where you live. Hey. But if you're just out playing around with a car, nobody else is around. It's just you in the car, you in your car with a buddy or your girl or whatever the case is. Yeah, you're just out having fun. And that's, at that point, the 6-speed can seriously be a lot more fun. A little Mustang back here with a manual is a lot of fun to play with. Mopar's checking and saying, hey, bro, keep making videos. I will. I like it. Kevin saying, just might order that Joker cam around Christmas, and if I ever get the E-Force down the line, I'd compliment that cam. I'll drive it down there, and we got to do some runs. Absolutely. Arm flex on that. Yeah, so that cam will do just fine with that blower. No problem. No problem. As a matter of fact, I'd say pulley it up and get ready when it comes time for it. Because she's gonna scream with that cam. Brent saying, very treating rather than bad boys out. Yeah, you can. Some of them Mustangs. GS1 saying, if you went back to the mid-90s with a 2019 Scat Pack Charger running mid-12 stock, people would flip out. Yeah, they would. They wouldn't know what to do with that car. Cody's saying, not only that, but the 5.0 revs out pretty darn high for a V8. Yeah, it does. Let's see. Chuck saying, Brian, let us know when you hit the drag strip. I need to explore your channel more. Man, I'm at the drag strip literally every weekend that it's not raining. But yeah, if you go onto my channel, if you ever want to see what I've been up to, check out just the channel, the playlist. Somewhere in there, you'll see a ton of ride-along videos with me. Some of them with commentary, some of them without. You'll see one where I went 1016 with the stock boost Little Miss Revlon. That's with the passenger seat in the car. Basically just went out and, that was, I think it was back last February when she did that. So, but there's all kinds of stuff on there, all kinds of nutty videos. I'm always up to something. But yeah, check it out. I think you will be, if nothing else, it's, the sure cure for insomnia, right? Who's saying, yeah, that ambient lighting and the cup holders and stuff is super dope. I love it. Didn't know Dodges used to have that feature. I didn't either. I didn't know if they did or didn't. I know they don't now, and it kind of, they've got it sort of, but they don't have, they've got the, little halo light for the trucks, and I think the cars may have it too, but the thing that, I I just like that kind of stuff just because we have the technology to do it now. And, you know, it's kind of cool to have something that's a little bit different and that, you know, you're making the car a little bit more your own and a little bit more fitted to you. So, you know, it's, I don't know. I just love that kind of stuff. And I think that it's neat, and I just wish more folks did it. Let's see. Oh, Catalyst is asking, is it fair to say that the CUDA is never going to come out because it was a Plymouth? No, not really, because at this point, I think everybody's kind of past the Plymouth, Chrysler, Dodge, associative way of thinking about that stuff with the actual car names. You know, Dodge, CUDA, I mean, it's all the same, really. But I think more to the point, the question really is that thing ever going to gain any traction? Is it ever going to grow any legs and become something? I think that's the question that a lot of folks are asking. And look, the problem with Dodge and FCA right now is that there's nothing really to get excited about. So the super stock is pretty cool. Okay, don't get me wrong. I like the super stock. I think the marketing behind it, it kind of started pushing rope a little bit. But still, yeah, kind of a slap in the face of the 1320. I got a video on that where I was like, they said it was the last or the only muscle car fitted with drag radials from the factory, and somebody's trying to say, well, it's a 2021. I'm like, you can still buy 1320s as 2021 models, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody in marketing just kind of screwed that up. But anyway, I digress. Getting into it, though, there's just really nothing to get super excited about. The TRX, yeah, maybe. But again, we start talking about the CUDA, maybe the new Viper. Let's talk about some kind of a real punchy, you know, just fun to drive, nasty little, you know, hot hatch type car that they can come out with. You know, anything along those lines where you might get a little bit excited. You know, maybe something, you know, like a, you know, something for like the high gas mileage crowd. You know, that's, so again, not to get too far off track, when I was big into the Vipers, the other car that guys would get would be Honda Insights. And this is actually before the Prius, little hybrid contraption. And what they would do is, the trick I want to say was to get somewhere, I didn't ever own one, but the trick with the Insight was to try to get 65 or better miles per gallon, I think that was the number. I think the going number, the car would just go out and run like 45 or 50, and they were trying to get 65 or something like that. Anyway, a bunch of the Viper guys had them, and it was funny because you would be we'd be at the Blint base, and the Blint base, there was a closed circuit track at the old Goodyear facility here in Southeast Texas. And so we would go out and rent out the entire facility. And the funny thing is sitting around lunch, these guys weren't talking about their Vipers at all. They were talking about their Insights and trying to get this kind of mileage out of them. I just remember hearing, you know, just kind of eavesdropping more or less than anything else, going, what? I mean, it was just, but I mean, that's, you know, you get a bunch of engineers, which is what a lot of these guys were. You get a lot of these guys sitting around a table and they'll start talking about all kinds of weird stuff. And this was one of the things that they did. Anyway, something along those lines is where I'm going with this. You know, mix it up a little bit, Dodge. You know, I mean, you know, it's okay to, you know, go a little bit off of the recipe book. I mean, it's just, you know, give us something with a little bit different flavor is what I guess I'm asking. You know, still with the spice, still with the punch, but give me something a little bit different. What would be sick to death is if they decided to go all Mopar on, you know, an EV setup and just build some nasty all-wheel drive EV or, you know, hot rod rear-wheel drive EV contraption. Wouldn't that be awesome? Go out there and run some freaking nines with that thing. Brent's saying a good trans tune on the 392 wakes the trans up though, man. It wakes the entire car up. you get more out of the trans tune than you get out of really anything on those cars. Chuck saying, I just go out and play in my Challenger legally. Maybe. Well, within the spirit of the law, right? I like it. Anthony G saying, thanks, Pete. Thank you, man. Cody saying, I want Jim to bring back the Regal GNX. Yeah, the old, man, I'll tell you what, the problem with like the old Grand National, the T-Types, GNX, the thing is that, wouldn't it be neat if they would? Here's the problem. GM since what, the early 2000s? I mean, the 5th gen and 6th gen Camaro and kind of the CTS family notwithstanding. But even then, they're still kind of loosely based on the Holden stuff. And it was, you never got the sense that it was an American hot rod. I always got the sense that it was kind of a reworked and rebodied, Aussie supercar. Like this thing was meant to be 4 doors, but now it's 2 doors. Well, that's kind of the same for the Challenger, but in fact, technically it was always meant to be. Anyway, squirrel. Get back to it though. It's one of these types of scenarios where when you're talking about those cars, the G body, which is the platform that those cars are based off, that we're talking about now, like a Regal T-Type GNX Grand National, uniquely Chevrolet, uniquely American. And the problem isn't that the GTO wasn't, or was what it was, is that it wasn't what it wasn't. It wasn't a uniquely American car. And, some would argue that that's a good thing, but I'll argue against that. Look at cars like the Crown Victoria. Here's a car for you. The Crown Victoria, you would never think to be a hot rod. You would never think, wow, this is going to be something cool, right up until the Mercury Marauder, right? Now all of a sudden, you got this big 4-door sedan with a 300 horsepower Mach 1 engine in it. And you kind of get the idea that, oh man, that's a big American hot rod car, right? Chevrolet didn't ever give you that. I mean, the last big car would have been the Caprice, and that would have been the only platform that would have given you any semblance to, a throwback to a muscle car from that point forward. So a bit of a bummer. And yeah, there were some cool cars. The SS was undermarketed. I think that was a stopgap measure. The Camaro, I think, was really never given the development that it should have been given, and has been suffering ever since. So yeah, I see what you're saying though. Pearl saying, love your channel. Question, thank you very much, appreciate that. Question, kind of off topic, but I'm curious, what is your dream car with or without mods? Ooh, man. Good question. What would be my dream car with or without mods? That opens up, like, it would depend a lot on what I would be doing with it. So number one just popped into my head. Jeep Wagoneer with a 392 or a Hellcat swap would be probably first on my list. Next would be FJ40 with a LS3 swap. Next on that list would be my freaking 72 3/4 ton GMC, just running and driving. But, LS swap, just burnout machine more than anything else. I like some of the more obscure stuff, though. I mean, I'm going to start getting more into some of the older, like Stage 1 Buick would be in there. Super Stock Savoy would be in there. The early race Hemi Savoys. It's just so many different ones for all kinds of different reasons. But again, the one that came, popped into my head first would be the modern Hemi swapped Wagoneer. Actually, it would be an early Hemi swapped, if you could find one, Super Wagoneer. Let's see. Oh, Brent's hanging out with Cody. Say hi to GN. Very fun. Very, very fun. GS1 saying so nerdy. Dude, I'll nerd out quick. Brent saying, I think Buick is done making cars after 2021. They've been done making cars, I think, for a while. I think they just phoned it in. More like crossovers. Chuck saying, I think they should build more Demons with a 6-speed manual. The problem with the Demon with a 6-speed manual is that the 6-speed that they would put in it wouldn't do it any good for drag racing because first gear is, you know, a 220 something, and you just need more first gear. Like a 297 would be much better, but it'd be fun to see what they could do if they made it, you know, if they gave it the appropriate modifications that it would need to hold together, because that would be pretty violent launching one of those things. But we can do that. That's not a problem. Let's see. Adam Bob saying, it's a controversial subject. Are 305s worth overstepping for on a 9.5-inch rim or a waist? It depends on the rim. It mainly depends on the rim diameter. And so here's the problem. 305s, I run 305 45 17s on a 17 by 9.5 inch, I think it's 9.5 inch, anyway, Race Star wheel. But in that case, I've got so tall of a sidewall that it doesn't affect the actual contact patch. In fact, the way that tire sits on the rim, the contact patch looks really good. And it's kind of the go-to tire combination for Challengers, for Mustangs, and for Camaros. So in that case, they work out great. Now, if you want to start talking about on a 20-inch rim that's 20 by 9.5, the problem isn't the fact that it's a wider tire in terms of footprint. The problem is the aspect ratio. The aspect ratio is just fancy fart-smelling talk for sidewall, the sidewall height. When you have a short sidewall height, the problem is that it immediately bows out because the tire is significantly wider than the rim. Because of that bowing, that more drastic angle, if this is your rim, I'm going to get this just right, if this is your rim and this hand is your tire, the ideal setup is for that tire to be in line with that wheel. That means that the power and the weight, I should say, and by association the power, is in a direct line of sight straight to the ground. If you kick that thing out, you're no longer a direct line of sight. Now you're moving it outwards. And what happens is that has a tendency to make that contact patch a little bit funky. The more dramatic the tire bulges, the more of an issue that's going to become with the contact patch. So that's why it's recommended on a 9.5 inch wide. I personally wouldn't go any wider than a 275, primarily for the aesthetic, but well, secondarily for the aesthetic. I think it actually looks pretty good. And they work fine. But the other side of that is, again, the more dramatic you get with that sidewall, especially on a 20, and with that short aspect ratio, again, it's going to screw up the contact patch. And I've pattern tested this before. In fact, with my 305s on the 9.5 inch, sorry, I was thinking about the stock wheels for the Scat packs there for a minute. Got a little bit squirrel on that thing. Anyway, when I pattern tested the 305s on my SRT wheels, what I was trying to get to, the issue that I ran into is that the pattern didn't look right until I was running about 32, 33 pounds of air pressure. And what was happening is you would just get you would get the outer edges of the tire, but you wouldn't get any of the middle of the tire actually hooking up, or properly hooking up. And so you would see these two train tracks. It looked like two little RC cars had done burnouts. That's what it looked like at 26, 27 psi. You think, oh, I can't believe it. Believe it. I mean, when I went out and did all the pattern testing, that's exactly what I found with them. So, kind of a frustrating deal, but that is the truth. Brendan's saying, hey, B Mason, looking into a drag pack for my Hellcat with skinnies. What wheels would you recommend without me having to do a brake conversion? Man, I tell you what, there's a lot of fast cars running around on Dark Stars. What is it? 18 by, let me think about this for a minute. 18 by 5 fronts and 17 by 9.5, I think is what I've got on the back of that car. Yeah, 17 by 9.5 for the rears. That's then like back over there somewhere. That's what I would go with. And really, I mean, you got the welds and everything else that's out there. Look, if you're going to be driving your car to and from the drag strip, look at these cars are heavy. The Dark Stars are, and I haven't had any issues. A lot of folks run those wheels and don't have any issues whatsoever with them at all. In terms of durability or anything like that. They can be a bit of a bear though to install, mainly because they use a shank lug nut. And all that means is that the lug nut goes through the wheel to the hub. They use a shank lug nut, but aside from that, I mean, it's race car stuff. It's got something you have to live with. But I mean, I love them, and run the right tires. I would not run bias plies on one of these cars, man. By the way, Foxy used to roll on bias ply, ET Streets, and Mickey Thompson front runners. Just drove it around like that everywhere I went. But anyway, getting back to it, run radials. With the weight of these cars, their independent rear suspension, these are some things that just don't lend themselves very well to bias ply. Get a little bit wandery at the top end of the track. Saw Racer X going down the track one day, full bias ply setup, just about freaking fell out of my skin. The back of that car just, anyway. But I say all that. I ran bias plies in the Vipers and I ran them in the Vets, obviously independent rear suspension, but manual transmission cars are going to like bias ply a lot more than they will radials because you've got to hit them with everything you got on the launch. And bias ply will soak it up, but radials will not. Brent saying, get a nice set of race stars. Absolutely. Good option. Cal's asking, what is your favorite year for the Plymouth Fury? It depends. I like the Sport Furies of like 66, 67, I think was the year. Somewhere in there. But the big Sport Furies were actually kind of cool too. Sport Fury GT, I think is one of the ones that if I remember correctly. Anyway, the real big Sport Furies just look butch as hell. But no, I think it was the 66, somewhere in that range. The ones that are right before they started to get bigger. That's the ones that I like. Love the Savoy, Sport Furies, Belvederes, all of those. Zephyr saying, LS3 FJ40, have you seen the Icon FJ40s by Jonathan Ward's company? I've heard of them and I've seen some of them, and yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. I've seen some of his cars though, and yeah, they're insane. GS1 is saying, I was saying the engineers with the insights was so nerdy. Oh yeah, no, it's true. I mean, listen, a lot of the guys that I was going out and doing dumb stuff, a lot of those guys were NASA guys, and it was just funny. You get these guys together and they start talking about stuff, and I mean, a lot of the stuff that I learned, I kind of just gleaned off of talking to them and picking their brain about just various crap. It could be anything, but I mean, you talk about breaking down something to the nth degree. That's literally what they do for a living. So. Yeah, super nerdy, super cool though, man. And I'm a wannabe nerd, so I was trying to hang with the cool nerds, and I was like butters. But the cool thing is I did get a chance to learn a lot, and they taught me a lot of good math, and so I was thankful to them for that. Cody's saying, so on the topic of tires, would wider drag slips give better grip, or would the OEM with drag slip do the same? Again, it depends on your power level. If you're talking about like the power level that we're playing with here, you want, first of all, in general, you want the smallest tire that will hook under the conditions that you're running in. Having a real big tire isn't going to do you a whole lot of favors if you will hook at a much smaller tire, because the smaller tire is going to be lighter, less rolling resistance on the big end, all of that. So stick with the OEM size. Going too far outside of that, you know, if you want to do it a little bit for the aesthetic, yeah, go for it, not a big deal. But for the best performance, again, you want that tire to be right in line. There you go, right in line with that rim. That's going to give you the most consistent, the best contact patch for any pressure that you run. And it will allow you the ability to have a more stable tire and a more stable assembly going down the track or going down the street, for that matter. Cash is saying, I stopped caring about being fast when cheap cars started having 3 seconds 0 to 60 times. True that. A lot of cars that are really fast that you wouldn't expect. And fun. A lot of stuff that's a lot of fun that you may not expect. If you haven't seen it, just check out my review of the minivan. I think you'll get a kick out of that. Nick's checking in and saying, "What up, be glad I could catch the chat for a bit." Glad you're making in, Nick. Now, the main thing I wanted to talk about, though, really is, you know, when we're talking about just, you know, at what point, you know, when in the whole grand scheme of automotive did fast quit being fast and quick and all this other stuff? And, you know, primarily, you know, hanging on the American side of this, you know, not really bringing up BMW. You know, Mercedes doesn't want to have any of this either, you know, because they played their part in pretty much wrecking shop on, you know, and destroying some of the, you know, preconceived notions. But again, you know, what fast was, or you know, what was the limit? You know, even back then, guys were saying, look, you know, if tires ever get better, then, you know, this thing is going to be fast. Or, you know, if you know, transmissions could get better, and those guys that were saying that were developing and were the engineers that were developing what we will eventually would have today. So, you know, it just blows my mind how far we've come, you know, in the small amount of time. But really, you know, 2015 was the year that gave us the Hellcat, and 2015 is the year that gave us the mass-produced 10-second car. And I think that, you know, say what you want, you go back to the import scenes, a lot of the fast stuff from the import scene, a lot of the fast muscle car guy stuff, you know, the modified Vipers and Vets and Supers and all that, those were all great. But you hit 2015 and you could see the complexion completely start to change. That was when the horsepower wars took off in a big way. And keep in mind that you had cars like the ZL1, which was what, 550 horsepower leading into this, right? And I mean, let's be honest, man, a 392 Scat Pack will give one of those Gen 5 ZL1s all it can handle in the quarter mile. The reality is that once the 8-speed was matched with 700 horsepower, things got real quick. And again, what used to be fast stopped being fast when you're talking about stock cars. And that's the other thing. You also have to reel this thing back to, look, you can modify anything to be fast. Believe me. I mean, everybody on every continent, this is not a unique American or Australia thing. You've got this going on all over the world. You can make anything scream, but the ultra fast American cars, mass produced, stuff that you're going to see every day. I'm not talking about a Super Snake. I'm not talking about, you know, a Celine S7 or something like that. You're just never going to see except for at a car show, and that, if ever. That really got nasty when the Hellcat was released. And it's one of the reasons why it still is the yardstick today. Adam's saying, would you who would you recommend for a ported or bigger throttle body for a 392? Fastman is who I would. And what size? 84 millimeter. Non-boosted application. There you go. That's what you would want. Give Fastman a shout. He doesn't sponsor the channel or anything, but you know, makes a really good throttle body. So go with that, or give Dr. Diff a shout. He's got some billet pieces that are gorgeous. I think he's got an 85 out there. So call Dr. Diff first. Go from there. Fastman's got a good product though. GS1 saying, you see guys doing the power tour running 7s. Yeah, you do, and those are some of the slower cars. Lutz, I think, had his 57 was running 5s at the power tour at one point, just dragging a trailer down the street. Cody's saying, nowadays, even the old Honda Civics are a force to be reckoned with. Yeah, they are. Dude, back in the day, Civics were nasty. So there was a guy, I cannot remember his name. There was a guy that had a red four-door Civic, lowered, had a good-looking set of wheels on it, but it was turbo B whatever. But anyway, the car was fast, and it was legitimately fast, not just fast for a Civic. The car at the drag strip would run 11 7s, but that wasn't the whole story. The car would hang with stock Gen 2 Vipers on the highway. I mean, the car just... That thing came into boost, it had turbo, I'm not sure the size or anything like that. Anyway, that thing, when it came into boost, was fast. And the only way that you could really tell there was anything going on with it is you could see the intercooler up front and the blow-off valve, and that was it. He had there was a at the intercooler blow-off valve. Anyway, that's the only thing you could really see. Anyway, the car was legitimately fast, regardless of how you measure fast. But you know, that's just kind of the way that was playing out back then. And God, there was some just fun stuff. You know, the DSM car, you know, the Eclipses. God, I used to love those things, man. And those are the kind of cars where it's kind of a bummer that there probably will never be another era like that. You know, the DSM cars with the Eclipse, the Talon, just, oh man, there were just so many neat, and with just the variants of the different types of cars. It wasn't necessarily muscle cars, but there were just so many neat cars that were out there. Brent saying, nowadays the 2.3 Mustang has 330 horsepower. That's true. Cal's saying, most overrated car of all time, most underrated. Well, it depends on what you call and how you want to really call overrated or underrated. So overrated, the first car that comes to mind would be the DeLorean, but it wouldn't be because it was overrated. It just never got the engine that it needed, that Renault thing, but it looked the part. So maybe the perception of that car was way different than the reality of it. Overrated. You know, it's hard to say, because if you start playing around with cars from the era, okay, I'm going to make a lot of people hate me real quick. Most overrated, street Hemi. Pretty much anything with a street Hemi would have been a bit of a problem. If you're a sales guy, okay? If you're a sales guy, keeping in mind that you're selling to a performance enthusiast, and if you're a sales guy circa 1968, and you're looking at a prospect, and this particular prospect wants something that they can go out and just, you know, rip the streets apart with. If you put that prospect behind the wheel of a car, let's say it's a Challenger with a 440, and then take that same prospect and put him in a Hemi, the problem is that the 440 will have done all of its work before the Hemi even wakes up to get out of bed. All right? I know this because I've driven them and I've dynoed them. The problem with the Hemi is that when it comes on, it's strong. It comes on great, but you couldn't sell them for $890 or whatever the number was. Keep in mind that the inflation rate puts that at $8,900. Could you imagine going into a dealership to buy a Scat pack and they say, hey, for $8,900 more, you can have a Hellcat? A lot of people would have made the switch just based on that fact alone, right? A lot of folks chose against the Hemi because of that. So in terms of being overrated, that might be the most overrated. But for reasons that you might not have initially thought. Most underrated. Man, that's a tough one. I would say one of the more unsung cars would have been the L79 396 cars. That would be a 396 with the L88 heads. That would be maybe one of the more underrated. The L88 427 technically would be the most underrated. That was rated at 435 horsepower versus 430 for the tri-power. And that car was nowhere near 435 horsepower. That thing in a solid state of tune, what the hell flipped my face? That thing in a solid state of tune was a 10-second car. So, or at least like an 1120 car, very fast. So by rights, that would be the most underrated car. But again, you start getting into, you know, what eras and things like that. I mean, you know, underrated in terms of fun. Golly, I would say Volkswagen Rabbit. You know, the early to mid 80s Rabbit. If you've never driven one, they're a freaking riot. I mean, they're throwaway economy cars for some, but I don't know. I love those things. Good question, by the way. Chuck Rice is saying Dodge Dart, 68 Dart, 383. That would have been a lot of fun. Well, guys, we are coming up on 2 hours. I'm going to have to bail. I got to get me some sleep because I got to wake up early. But I want to thank every one of y'all for hanging out with me this evening. Brent's asking, Mr. Mason, do you miss your 392 at all? Yeah, I do. There are times when I do miss that car. Especially miss it when I can't get my hands on any tires. That thing with dead hook on 20-inch was a joy on the drag pack, but yeah. This thing, we're just gonna have to wait until November, which is cool. I'm having fun just going to the drag strip, visiting with folks. I typically wouldn't get the opportunity to visit and mingle with guys, so this might be a kind of a blessing in disguise as far as I'm concerned. But at any rate, guys, I got to jump out of here. Guys, please, y'all keep staying safe. Keep wearing your mask, not for yourself, then do it for others. God bless, love each and every one of y'all, and that is a wrap. Adios.